Hello, this is iPo Swords, and I am an antique sword collector. I own many items ranging as far back as 1600, and made of rare and exotic materials like Wootz crucible steel, also known as true Damascus steel, as much as I hate to use the term. I have a long history collecting these swords, conserving them, and in some rare cases, even performing conservative restorations, like the pala that I recently etched in oxalic acid in accordance with a guideline published by the Victorian Albert Museum, which talked about responsible ways to etch steels that have a contrasting pattern, like Wootz or Damascus pattern welded steel. However, this video is not about responsible collecting, responsible conservation, or responsible restorations. It's not even about antiques. It's about the opposite of all those things. Let's talk about that. Today we're going to be talking about something rather different to our normal fare. Today I'm going to be responding to a video by another YouTube content creator known as Random Hands. He recently published a video entitled Antique Egyptian Dagger Impressive Restoration. I'm here to contend that it is neither a restoration nor an antique, and in order to demonstrate that, I have an exact copy of the same dagger, which I purchased for around 100 USD, from a company which produces them in India called Windlass. Not only is this a modern reproduction dagger, identical to his, it's also not even Egyptian. This is a copy of a European Untitled Rondel Dagger, a dagger intended to defeat armor. Now, he didn't specify that his was supposed to be an ancient Egyptian dagger, just antique Egyptian. So it could be in the era where brass and steel were both commonly available in Egypt. It doesn't necessarily have to be an ancient Egyptian dagger, which would have been made of bronze or meteoric iron in the case of one or two royal exceptions. This is therefore a modern reproduction. You can compare my example here to his example and other listings on the net from manufacturers such as Windlass and Marshal Historical, who both make these in India. I'd now like to get onto a more serious point. What he calls a restoration is in fact a destructive method, and if you use it on an actual antique, you would be destroying it. His method of restoration begins with using acid to get rid of the rust on the steel or convert the rust, which is a generally acceptable thing if done correctly and in the right context. However, he then goes many steps further. Random Hands grinds the blade of the knife. He also completely removes the handle and replaces it with one with no resemblance to the original. He also polishes the blade to a mirror finish, unlike the originals would have displayed. A restoration in the antique world is supposed to bring an artifact back up to a presentable standard. It is not meant to fundamentally change the nature and identity of the antique. Random Hands videos, of which there are many, all follow the same format. He uses a cheap wall hanger or reproduction, including famous ones from movies like Lord of the Rings and the Strider sword, and then he performs an ill-advised restoration. Now, normally, I wouldn't care, but he is pulling millions of views, and those millions of views could translate to at least one person looking at an antique that they find at a shop or have in their house and using his same methods on that antique. That would fundamentally destroy the historical and monetary value of that item. It's therefore irresponsible and unethical for him to produce content like that, claiming that he's doing it on antiques and claiming that it is a restoration. What he is doing is more like a conversion or a upcycling into a completely new item, with no interest in preserving the history of anything he touches, if it had any history to begin with. Because he's only doing this on cheap reproductions, it's easy to excuse it and say it's just clickbait, but there can be real repercussions to doing something like this. You are fundamentally misleading your viewers, and they could be damaging items with actual history, and that damage cannot be reversed. Random Hands, you need to relabel your videos. You need to be clear that what you are doing is not an antique restoration. It is neither of those things. It is an artificially aged replica which is being modified. What you are doing is wrong. And if you're a viewer of his channel, remember, do not do this with an antique that you own. Do not do it with something that you suspect might be an antique, even if you don't know. If you have a sword or a knife that needs restoration, consult with an actual expert. Consult with a museum, consult with a university, have it identified, and have a course of action made. Even give it to a conservator to perform that if you do not have the skills. A conservative restoration, which preserves the artifact and its history, is infinitely preferable to something which destroys it. Anyway, this is iPoSwords. I hope you've enjoyed this rant or video, depending on which way you look at it, because that's all I've got for you today. Until next time, stay sharp and try not to destroy anything in the meanwhile.